Welcome, gamers, weebs, and nerds alike. Nothing really beats fighting giant monsters, taking down dragons, skeletal gods, monsters that threaten all life as we know it. There's just something about taking on these gigantic monsters that really just scratches that itch in gamers. And there are a plethora of great monster fights out there, so with the release of Monster Hunter Wilds, what better time to talk about some of the best? So in today's video, we're going through 10 of the greatest monster fights in gaming. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on more geek content, and without further ado, let's get into the list.
Starting out on a more lighthearted note, first up on our list is Lady Venomara from the most recent Game of the Year winner in Astrobot. Astrobot is full of charming surprises, both big and small, and the final boss of the Serpent Starway Nebula falls firmly into the former category. The Golden Cobra, known as Lady Venomara, is absolutely massive, and despite the game's kid-friendly vibe, Lady Venomara offers a very real challenge with a variety of attacks that test players' mastery of the game's mechanics and their own resolve. This massive serpent throws everything she has at the player. She regurgitates eggs full of enemies into the area, swipes at players with her enormous tail, and knocks rocks down from the ceiling before covering the floor with purple venom that will kill players on contact. The biggest challenge isn't actually fighting Lady Venomara, it's surviving long enough to get a hit in. It really is a fun challenge that will keep you on your toes. Now, of course, the real reason that this made the list is simply the fact that the entire time you get to navigate this wild fight with a chicken-powered jetpack, people.
Next up, we have Elatrion from Monster Hunter World. Of course, we have to do a Monster Hunter monster on here, and who better than Elatrion? This dragon stands above all Elder Dragons as the master of the elements, possessing control over all of them. It also has sharp scales that constantly emit elemental energy, imbuing them with different properties, but you can break them off temporarily to weaken it. There are 3 different modes that it switches between, forcing the player to adapt elements on the fly to maximize damage and avoid drawing out the fight longer than it needs to. This is an outstanding fight that takes a lot of prep time and strategy to make sure you have the correct gear and weapons for the fight, especially if you decide to go solo. While it is designed as an endgame boss, it is still extremely difficult and challenging to take it down, even with top tier gear. But to top it off, it looks awesome as a gigantic blazing black dragon that produces some of the sickest looking gear in the game, making this monster definitely live up to its name.
Next up on our list, we have Apostle of Merkul. Being the very first real big monster you fight in Baldur's Gate 3, and something that you've been building up to for tens if not hundreds of hours, this is Ketheric Thorm's second phase, and it is a nightmare if you aren't prepared, and will definitely end many a hardcore run. His design is creepy and grotesque, just adding to the imposing nature of the god of bones and death. His attacks are extremely heavy-hitting, and you have to worry about a ton of his minions potentially killing you in the process of getting to him. The music is just downright epic, really making it feel like you are fighting, well, a god. From the pool of blood that he emerges from, the fleshy ground of the nautiloid that you have to maneuver around, to the giant scythe and plague breath he attacks you with, this monster is an absolute thrill, and is always an exciting yet dreadful moment of every playthrough.
Now we have Bahamut in Final Fantasy XVI. Can't talk about greatest monsters and not mention a Final Fantasy game, especially with the spectacle that is Final Fantasy XVI. Yes, this game has its issues, but you cannot deny this game delivers tenfold on the boss fights and even more so on the icon fights. At this point, you finally reunite with Joshua and your horrible mistake of a mother, we'll save that for another video, and get this confrontation you've been waiting for until Joshua comes crashing in as the Phoenix with the giant dragon Bahamut on his tail. While the fight is not necessarily difficult as it's more for the cool factor and spectacle, it is freaking fun. First controlling Joshua as the Phoenix, as Bahamut uses his ridiculous power to just completely destroy the area and attempt to kill you. Then it drains the crystal and fights Clive/Ifrit on the now open crystal with different breath attacks and flying swipes and tail whips before firing a giant laser blast, eventually forcing both Ifrit and Phoenix to combine in order to finally defeat it as you both fight in space. And it fires one final ultimate attack that looks straight out of something from Fate. Bahamut is absolutely amazing, has such a cool design, fun and breathtakingly beautiful attacks, and cements itself as a legend in gaming monsters.
Next up on our list is Calamari Ganon. Another culmination of tens if not hundreds of hours, this time spent in Breath of the Wild, you finally face off against Link's arch nemesis in Ganon. The thing that brought all of Hyrule to its knees, killing all of the heroes from each tribe and forcing Link into a 100-year slumber. The first phase of the fight isn't too terrible as he bounces around the arena and uses some ranged and melee attacks, the later of which can be parried, leaving him open to some devastating damage. Also, if you manage to save the 4 other Guardians, you can use them to severely weaken him and do huge damage, giving you a massive advantage in the fight. Once you beat him around enough, he goes big boy mode and becomes a giant beast, fitting of the name Dark Beast Ganon, with reddish-purple flames coming out of his body, forcing Link to ride his horse around and defeat him with the new light bow that Zelda gives you. Attacking his weak points while also avoiding all of the AoE abilities is quite a feat. The spectacle of this fight is awesome, and it really just fits as a great end to a great game. And of course, Ganon's design in both phases 1 and 2 is equal parts epic and eerie. Not to mention, the music really just ties everything together, making this a fantastic monster fight.
Next up, we have the Archdemon from Dragon Age Origins. This dragon is the king head of the Darkspawn hordes, the cause of the Blight, something that could bring an end to the world, and it causes a huge choice for the player character at the end of the game. This thing is huge, completely towering over the player and their party. It deals massive amounts of damage with both its melee attacks and its fire blast, which can reach almost anywhere in the entire arena. Not only are you having to deal with it, but you also have to deal with some Darkspawn as well. Even though this is the final boss of the entire game, it's still extremely challenging, even on normal difficulty, which just adds on to the daunting task of taking it down. The design is cool, being a dragon with sharp teeth jettisoning out of its mouth, 2 giant horns, and the deathly rotted blight that spews from its mouth. To top it off, in order to actually bring down this old god and end the blight, a life must be sacrificed as well. Whoever kills the Archdemon also dies in turn, leading to some very difficult decisions as to who takes it down. The fact alone that this dang dragon refuses to go down unless it takes you with it is both scary and awesome, just adding on to its great lore and design as the final monster in Dragon Age Origins.
Next up on our list, we have Baal the Dread. This is hands down one of the coolest monsters, not only in Souls games, but gaming in general. His setup is almost unparalleled, with Egon screaming his name and cursing him, performance of the year by the way, as he swoops in, battle damaged from his fight with Dragon Lord Prestigious Axe, leaving him damaged wings and arms and the loss of his left leg. No big deal. This fight is almost unmatched and rather difficult, especially after the rough climb you had to make it up the jagged peaks to get there. The first phase has him on the ground throwing his massive size around in giant fire breath attacks that would make Dark Eater Midir blush. Then in phase 2, out of pure rage, my boy sprouts lightning wings and starts flying around. This fight is the right amount of difficult and just pure awesome, from the presentation to the lore beats to the mechanics, making this a fantastic monster fight.
Now we have Malzeno from Monster Hunter Rise. We gotta include another Monster Hunter monster on here, and who better than the poster child of Monster Hunter Rise's DLC, Sunbreak. The amount of presence this thing has is huge, which is only compounded by the environment and one of the coolest moonshots you will ever see. It has dark scales covering its body with swarms of small flying leech-like creatures all over its body. And then once you take its health down far enough, it starts emitting light from different parts of its body, which just looks awesome. It can send the swarms of small leeches at the player, attack with its giant claws and spiked tail that can even shatter the ground. In its bloodening form, it becomes extremely agile, almost teleporting around, and creates massive explosions with black-red aftershocks. This fight is extremely difficult and does take a lot of prep, especially to manage its quick speeds. And to top it off, the gear looks absolutely sick, definitely making this a top-tier monster fight.
Now, it wouldn't be a true Variant Geek ranking video if I didn't give a spot to something World of Warcraft related. So next up on our list is Firelands Ragnaros. Look, any boss in WoW that took Paragon over 500 attempts hand down deserves to be on this list. Now, before we get torched in the comments, we know there are so many more incredible boss fights in WoW that could have made this list off of difficulty and mechanics alone. I'm looking at you alone in the dark, Yogg Saron. But Ragnaros just holds such a special place in our hearts as one of the original big bads of WoW, and his much-deserved facelift in Cataclysm is one of the expansion's few highlights. Going a step further, Ragnaros is an elemental lord in Primordial Azeroth, so really, he's an OG of Azeroth itself. As for his Firelands fight, it was unique, in its difficulty not coming from overtuning or bugs. Instead, it was the mechanics themselves, from the randomly spawning adds in certain phases to the necessity to nuke the boss so his meteors don't continue to spawn, to the magma geysers nuking your frost patch if 4 or more players were standing too close together, forcing a near mathematical perfection in precisioning. It was just a crazy time, okay? To conclude, from design to fight itself, the Fire Lord is an easy shoo-in on this list. Now, you'll excuse me, I have to go prep for raid on this guy in Classic.
Last, but definitely not least, we have the Reaper/Thresher Maw from Mass Effect 3. Now this might technically be cheating because I'm kind of throwing in a second monster with the Reaper, but it's just such a cool moment and it's on our list, so we're doing it. The Reapers have been alluded to for 2 previous games as the end of all life. These gigantic sentient machine-esque beings show up every 50,000 years and pretty much cull all advanced life. We encounter 1 in Mass Effect 1 and they were on their way, and finally in Mass Effect 3 they finally make their grand entrance, basically beating Earth and all other Council planets into submission within days, if not hours. The lore behind these big ass machines is extremely deep and interesting. Their design is creative, looking similar to gigantic squids, and their destructive capabilities are almost second to none. On Tachanka, the Korogan homeworld, you have to go face to face with one of them, absolutely towering over you as you try and summon a Thresher Maw, which is this gigantic worm with a blue tentacle that sprouts out of its mouth to take it down. We know the Reaper is huge, but then you see a worm that is just as big, if not a little bit bigger, wrap around it and just destroy it. The moment has a lot of buildup and it 100% pays off with these gigantic monsters duking it out for survival. And that wraps up our list for the greatest monster fights in gaming. We did leave off some absolutely amazing fights, so let us know in the comments what your favorite monster fight is. If you liked the video, make sure to like and share as that helps us out a lot. Check us out on Twitch and TikTok, and until the next video, keep on geeking on.